The screen opens in near-perfect silence. No music, no narration, only the sound of dry leaves beneath heavy footsteps and the soft breathing of a dog sniffing into the dark hollow between the trees of a Normandy forest in November. Liam, 45 years old, wool coat the color of charcoal, eyes accustomed to looking far, stops walking. Buster stops too. The golden retriever lifts his head, both ears standing straight, pointed in a single direction. That is the moment Liam knows. Something is here. Liam's voice rises. Not the voice of a presenter, but the voice of a man thinking out loud. I've walked through more than 200 cemeteries in 4 years, but this forest is different. No path leads in. It appears on no map. And that stone over there, I can see it clearly from 15 paces away, has been standing here since before my great-grandfather was born. The camera slows. It zooms in on a gray granite stone, covered in a thick layer of green lichen that nearly conceals its shape entirely. No name, no birth year, only a faint line of Latin, almost dissolved into the rock. Hic iacet, Anima Ignota. Here lies a soul unknown. Liam kneels. He places his bare hand on the face of the stone. Buster presses himself against Liam's side, warm and still. Since 1847, 177 years. No one has come here. Not a single flower. Not one candle. I don't know who you are, but today I am here. This is precisely why viewers keep watching. Not because of mystery, not because of horror, but because in that simple sentence, today, I am here, they feel the full weight of loneliness, of being forgotten, and something deeply human, the need to be witnessed. Liam says nothing more. He opens his backpack, pulls out a stiff brush and a bottle of water, and begins to work. Buster lies down beside the stone, chin resting on his 2 front paws, eyes open, watching. And the story begins. 3 days before Liam found the stone, he was sitting in a local library in Rouen, 40 kilometers to the east. He had not come here by plan. There was no plan. That was how Liam operated ever since Sarah died. 4 years ago, his wife passed on a Tuesday afternoon in March, quietly and quickly, so quickly that Liam never had time to prepare for anything, never said the things that needed saying, never sat beside her long enough. Only Buster, 2 years old then, his coat golden and soft with innocence, had lain beside the hospital bed through that final night. Afterward, Liam sold the house in Portland, bought an old van, and started driving. I didn't know if I was running away or searching for something, he says in a voiceover. His voice carrying no self-pity, only the honesty of exhaustion. Maybe both. But the first time I cleaned a grave in Vermont, I understood something. Caring for the dead didn't hurt the way I expected. It was actually very peaceful. Rouen led Liam to Normandy, not through a tourist map, but through a bundle of 19th century land records that the librarian, Madame Colette, 71 years old, glasses thick as bottle glass, unearthed from the archive room after 2 hours of searching. In those records, a handwritten note in Old French mentioned Sépulture isolée dans la forêt de Brouet, an isolated grave in the forest of Brouet. Buster slept under the reading table in the library. Madame Colette brought Liam a cup of coffee and asked no questions about why an American man was interested in records no one had touched in 60 years. The next morning, Liam drove into the forest. The road, if it could be called a road, disappeared after the first 4 kilometers. He parked along the edge, shouldered his pack, and clipped the leash onto Buster. The Normandy forest in November is not frightening in the way of horror films. Its silence is different. The silence of a place that has grown so accustomed to emptiness that it no longer expects anyone to arrive. Liam followed the approximate coordinates from the old record, crossing 2 dry stream beds and a patch of waterlogged ground. Buster did not bark, did not wander. The dog was always like this in the forest, more serious, more focused, as though he understood this was work. And then, through a stand of ancient oak trees, the morning light fell at an unusual angle, casting a thin shaft of gold across the ground. And Buster stopped. He stared straight ahead. Liam followed the dog's gaze, and he saw it. a granite stone rising from the earth, leaning to one side, nearly swallowed by a carpet of lichen and overgrown grass. No fence, no path, no sign whatsoever that any human being had stood in this place in many generations.
I see it.
Liam stood still for a long moment. Then he spoke softly, not to the camera, not to Buster, but to the stone. "I'm sorry you've been waiting so long." The work began at 9:17 in the morning. Liam knew the exact time because he always recorded it, not for the video but for himself, a habit from his years as a structural engineer, before life changed and he became the man with the van and the dog. He spread a small canvas cloth on the ground and laid his tools across it in order: a stiff brass brush, a soft nylon brush, a plastic scraping knife, a spray bottle of water, a bottle of D/2 biological solution, a specialized headstone cleaning product, non-corrosive, recommended by cemetery conservationists across America and Europe. Liam did not use acid, did not use heavy bleach. This was not cleaning, this was care. Buster chose his own position, lying down about 1 meter from the stone, face turned toward the forest. A self-appointed sentry. The first layer of lichen was thicker than expected, nearly 4 centimeters deep in some places. Liam worked in circles from the outside in, without rushing. He did not speak much during this part, only the sound of the brush, the water, the forest leaves. And gradually, like an old photograph developing in a dark room, the stone began to emerge. Gray-blue granite. The surface was hand-carved, clearly the work of a skilled stonecutter, not mass production. A decorative border of vine motifs ran along the edges, faded but legible enough to recognize. And at the center, where a name and dates should have been, there was only the Latin inscription already seen from a distance, and below it, a symbol. Liam stopped. He leaned closer, using a flashlight held at an angle to catch the shadow relief. And the symbol was a hand, a right hand, palm facing upward, fingers gently closed. Not a common religious symbol, not a cross, not a Christian lily, simply a hand. "I've seen many symbols on gravestones," Liam said quietly. "Crosses, stars, crescents, angels, but only a hand with the palm open and facing up. I've never seen that. This was someone who wanted to say something, or receive something." Buster suddenly stood, walked closer, touched Liam's hand lightly with his nose, then returned to his spot and lay back down. An ordinary gesture for any dog, but in that moment, it carried a strange and quiet weight. Liam worked until noon. When the face of the stone was clean enough to read everything that remained, he sat down, opened the lunch he had brought: dark bread, cheese, an apple. He broke it in half and offered Buster a portion. The dog ate gently without rushing. They ate in silence beside the nameless grave, in the middle of the Normandy forest. And Liam, for the first time since morning, smiled faintly. "Sarah would have loved this place," he said. He did not explain. There was no need. On the afternoon of the first day, after the face of the stone was clean, Liam photographed it from dozens of angles in different light and began taking notes. What he had: granite that was not locally sourced. This type of stone did not originate in Normandy and would have needed to be transported from Brittany or even Scotland, a considerable expense in the mid-19th century. Skilled craftsmanship. The Latin inscription was not written by someone repeating a phrase by rote, but by someone who understood Latin, or who had asked someone with real understanding to write it with particular care. And the upturned hand symbol: unusual, deliberate, meaningful. The person lying here was not poor, but neither were they aristocracy. Normandy's 19th century nobility was buried inside churches or within walled family plots, not alone in the middle of a forest. So why no name? Liam drove back to Rouen that evening, left Buster sleeping in the van, and spent 3 hours with Madame Colette and her boxes of records.
Thank you, madame.
She did not go home. She brought out a 4th cup of coffee, sat down beside him, and read alongside. What they found, or more precisely, what they inferred from scattered fragments of information, slowly outlined a possibility. In 1847, Normandy was suffering the economic tremors preceding the Revolution of 1848, but more significantly, This was the period when waves of Irish emigrants were pouring into France, fleeing the Great Famine, and Gorta More. Many Irish Catholics died in transit or shortly after arriving and were buried quietly by local communities, sometimes without documentation, without official names recorded, because they were undocumented foreigners in a foreign land. Anima Ignota, soul unknown, not because those who buried him did not know his name, but because writing it down was not safe, or because the deceased had requested exactly that, keeping the secret to the end, for reasons only the dead could know. The upturned hand. Liam studied the photograph of that symbol for a long time. In ancient Celtic tradition, he said, an open hand facing upward carries two meanings. One is, I carry no weapon, I come in peace. The other is, I am waiting. Waiting for what? Waiting for whom? He had no answer. Not yet. But the following morning, when Liam returned to the forest with Buster and continued working on the base of the stone, the section most deeply buried beneath soil and moss, he found something that appeared in no record anywhere. On the back face of the stone, near ground level, carved so small that only a flashlight held flush against the surface could reveal it, were two letters, E.M. And beneath those two letters, a number, 1823. Not a death year, but almost certainly a birth year. The person lying here had died in 1847, born in 1823, 24 years old. Buster lay down beside the base of the stone, placed his head on the ground, and closed his eyes. Liam rested his hand on the dog's head. E.M., 24 years old, 1847, in the middle of a Normandy forest, with an open hand and no name. I will find out who you are. Day 3. Liam returned with additional supplies, epoxy mortar formulated specifically for natural stone, in a neutral tone to correct the lean, and a small box of seeds, myosotis, blue forget-me-not flowers. Their name says everything. He did not bring cut flowers. Cut flowers would wither, seeds would remain. The technical work on day 3 was heavier. The stone had leaned 12 degrees after nearly 2 centuries. The soil beneath eroded away. Liam carefully excavated the backside, laid a drainage gravel base, then used epoxy mortar to reinforce the stone's footing. Not a grand restoration, but enough to keep the stone standing for several more decades. Buster helped in his own way, sitting still, not running off, not digging, occasionally standing to make a slow circuit around the small perimeter of the site, then returning. He does that everywhere I work, Liam said, watching Buster, like he's checking the perimeter, making sure no one intrudes. I never taught him that. He just knows. When the stone was stabilized and the mortar was setting, Liam took his softest brush and worked once more. Not to remove dirt this time, but to finish. Each carved line along the vine border was restored to visibility. The Latin inscription stood out more clearly in the slanting afternoon light, and the hand, the upturned hand at the center, emerged fully for the first time in decades, or perhaps for the first time in over a century. Liam stepped back and looked at the whole of what had been done. The stone was no longer a moss-covered rock. It was a gravestone. It was evidence that someone had lived, had been loved enough for another person to transport granite from a distant place, to commission delicate carving, to choose each symbol with care. Emma, 24 years old. Liam knelt and used his fingers to gently press forget-me-not seeds into the soil around the base of the stone. The forest floor was damp and loose. Good conditions. Come spring, if nothing interfered, there would be flowers here. I don't know who you are, but the person who put up this stone loved you. Of that I am certain. Buster moved closer, sniffed lightly at the earth where the seeds had just been placed, and then gently licked the back of Liam's hand once. No one said anything more. The late afternoon light filtered through the oak canopy, casting long gold streaks across the face of the newly cleaned stone. In that light, the carved hand looked almost as though it were truly moving, as though it were opening, waiting for something that had finally arrived. Liam stayed for another 15 minutes, doing nothing, just sitting. This is the part that most documentary channels would cut. Liam kept it. Those 15 minutes of silence, only forest sounds and the rhythm of Buster's breathing, he left in the video unchanged. And those 15 minutes had the highest retention rate of anything he had ever posted. On the morning of the fourth day, Liam was ready to leave. The backpack was closed. The van was running. Buster had already climbed into the passenger seat, ears up, waiting in his usual way. But Liam did not get in. He stood outside, looking toward the forest, hands in his coat pockets. Something was unfinished. He did not know what. After 10 minutes, he turned off the engine, opened the door for Buster, and walked back into the forest one final time. Not to do anything more, only to look once more. When he stood before the stone, upright now, clean, with seeds sleeping in the soil around its base, Buster suddenly began to dig at the earth beside the stone's footing. Not the frantic digging of a playful dog, slow, deliberate, focused on a single point. Buster, no! Liam stepped forward, reaching to pull the dog back. Then he stopped. Beneath the soil Buster had just turned over, less than 10 centimeters below the surface. Something was reflecting light. Liam knelt. He brushed away the remaining earth with his hand. A small object, metal, darkened by time but its shape still perfectly clear. He lifted it out and held it in his palm. It was a Celtic brooch, circular, roughly 3 centimeters across, made of silver. At its center was a double spiral motif, an ancient Irish symbol representing the journey outward and the journey home, death and rebirth. Around the edge, a line of small lettering was engraved in a ring, faded but fully readable. Go diti go gakasfar lechali arisin. Old Irish. Liam did not know Irish, but he had a phone. He stood in the middle of the Normandy forest, staring at the screen of an automatic translation app, reading words aloud for what may have been the first time in 177 years. Until we meet again. Liam said nothing. He could not. Buster pressed himself against Liam's leg, warm and quiet. And Liam, the 45-year-old man who had walked through more than 200 cemeteries, who had learned not to cry at the graves of strangers, could not hold it this time. Not because of the brooch, not because of the inscription, but because he suddenly understood. The person who had built this stone, who had loved EM enough to transport granite from far away, to hire a skilled craftsman, to choose every symbol with intention, that person had buried something alongside him, something carrying a promise, something that said, I will come back for you, just not yet. And that person, for whatever reason, I had never been able to return, until today, until Liam and Buster, two beings with no connection whatsoever to this story, walked into a forest and saw. On the evening of the fourth day, Liam sat in the van, the silver brooch resting on the dashboard before him. Buster curled up on the back seat. He did not post anything immediately, did not film more. He simply sat and thought. People ask me why I do this, he said, his voice barely above a murmur, as though speaking to himself. Why not do something more useful? Why travel everywhere cleaning the graves of strangers instead of rebuilding my own life? Liam looked at the brooch. I don't have a good answer. I only know that the first time I did this, 3 months after Sarah died, at a small cemetery in Vermont, at a grave from 1902, I felt something ease in my chest. It didn't disappear. It just eased, like exhaling after a long time of not knowing you had been holding your breath. This is the layer of meaning this content carries, the thing that separates it from hundreds of other history channels or exploration channels. Liam does not come to these graves as an explorer seeking spectacle. He comes as a man learning to carry his own loss. Each grave he restores is a silent conversation with absence, with Sarah, with all the things left unsaid, all the things left unfinished. Caring for the dead is not an escape from life. It is one of the most living acts a human being can perform. Recognizing that someone existed, was loved, and deserves to be remembered, even when no one else remembers anymore. In grief psychology, RE, there is a concept called continuing bonds, an ongoing relationship with the person who has died. Not letting go, not moving forward and forgetting, but finding a way to maintain a new kind of connection with someone who is no longer present. Liam does not know the academic terminology, but he is living it. Every time I place my hands on a gravestone and clean it, he said, I am saying to the person beneath, I see you, you matter. Your story matters. And a strange thing happens. I hear that back in my mind, but in Sarah's voice, as though she is saying it to me. I see you. You matter. Keep going. Buster shifted on the back seat, rested his head on Liam's shoulder. Liam said nothing more. Nothing needed to be said. This is the moment when viewers in the 35 to 65 demographic, those who have lost someone, and those carrying grief that is never fully resolved, recognize themselves in this story. Not because they also clean graves, but because they understand the feeling of searching for a form in which to say the things that cannot be said aloud. That is why they share this video. Not because it is mysterious or frightening, but because it touches something simultaneously deeply private and deeply universal. In the week after leaving Normandy, Liam posted a photograph of the silver brooch to the Irish Genealogy Research Society forum, along with photographs of the two initials EM in the year 1823. The responses came within 6 hours, more than 300 comments. Dozens of people who believed their ancestors had emigrated from Ireland to France during the period 1845 to 1850. Some sent documents, and one person sent a scanned copy of a passenger list from a ship sailing from Cork to Le Havre in 1846. Le Havre, the largest port in Normandy. In that list, among the names of families and individuals, a single line read simply, Emmett Malone, 23 ans, Seul. Emmett Malone, 23 years old, alone. Liam stared at the screen for longer than necessary. Emmett Malone, 23 years old when he left Cork, 24 when he died in a Normandy forest. Alone, as recorded on the passenger manifest. And yet someone had buried him with a granite stone brought from far away and a silver brooch carrying a promise to return. Someone had loved Emmett Malone deeply, and that person's name appeared in no record anywhere. This is where the real story begins, Liam said. Who was Emmett Malone before he stepped onto that ship? Why was he alone? And the person who left the brooch with its promise of, until we meet again, who were they? Why did they never come back? He paused. I have one more clue. In the land records in Rouen, Madame Colette found a note from 1849, 2 years after Emmett's death, about a woman from Ireland who came asking about un homme enterré dans la forêt de Brouet, a man buried in the forest of Brouet. She was told there were no records. She left. Her name in the record was M.E. The camera held on Liam's face for a moment. He offered no further explanation. None was needed. M.E., the mirror of E.M. I am going to find their story, he said finally. If you know anything about the Malone family from Cork, about Irish emigrants who came to Normandy between 1845 and 1850, or if you simply want to follow this journey, I will be here. Buster lifted his head from where he had been lying beneath the desk, looked directly into the camera. Before posting the video, Liam filmed one final segment, not in the library, not in the van, but in the forest of Normandy, for the fifth and last time on this journey. Early morning. The mist had not yet lifted. The gray-blue light of a forest dawn filtered through bare oak branches. Liam stood before the stone, upright, clean, with forget-me-not seeds sleeping beneath the earth around its base. He had not brought the large camera this time. Only his phone, mounted on a small stake pressed into the ground. Buster sat beside him, close against his shoulder. Liam placed the silver brooch back in the spot where Buster had found it. He had cleaned it, while photographed it thoroughly, recorded every detail, and covered it gently with a layer of soil. Not because he did not want to keep it, but because he felt it belonged here. Emmett, he said, his voice so soft that viewers would need to raise their volume to hear it. I don't know your whole story, but I know you were loved. I know someone promised they would come back for you, and I know, whatever reason kept them from returning, that promise mattered to you because you carried it with you. He stopped, looking at the carved hand on the stone. Next spring, there will be blue flowers here. I won't be here to see them, but the flowers will be here, and your story, your name, now has someone who knows it. He stood up, looked at the stone one final time. Emmett Malone, born 1823 in Cork, Ireland, died 1847 in Normandy, France. Why 24 years old? Loved. Not forgotten. Buster rose at the same moment Liam did, as though he had understood this was the signal. The dog turned his head toward the stone one last time. A small moment, unscripted, meaningless if you did not know the context, and carrying great weight if you had been watching from the beginning. They walked out of the forest together in the rising light of morning. Neither looked back. Liam did not end the video in the forest of Normandy. He added one final segment, filmed inside the van, driving away, Buster asleep on the back seat, morning light pouring through the windshield. His voice was calm, unperformed. 3 days before I found Emmett's grave, I received an email from a woman named Oif, Irish, now living in Boston. Wait, she said her great-great-grandfather had disappeared in France in 1847, and the family never knew what had happened to him. His name was Emmett. Liam let that sit for a moment. I hadn't replied to her email yet. I was waiting until I had enough information. Now I do. And I don't know how that conversation's going to go, but I'm going to record it. If you want to follow along, you know where to find me. A beat of silence. Thank you, Emmett. Thank you for waiting. The video ends. No music, no effects. Only the sound of the van's engine and the steady, even breathing of Buster sleeping.